How are y'all doing today? My name is Steven Pankos, and today we're going to be covering resistance training to increase sprint speed. So we're going to be covering the basics of a sprint. It's going to be a real quick overview. We're going to talk about why we're going to use resistance training to improve sprint speed. We're going to talk about our exercise selection, and then from there, we're going to talk about our programming selection. So what is a sprint? Sprint is simply running as fast as you can for a very short distance or a very short time. The sprint is split up into three different phases. The first phase is the start, followed by the acceleration, and then ending with the top speed. The picture on the top represents the start, and the picture on the bottom, the one on the left, is acceleration, and the picture on the bottom right is the top speed. As you can see, during the start, it's representing the sprinter is looking down. You have a very kind of horizontal back angle. And the toe strike is not a good picture. It's actually going to be in front of where the hips and the shoulders are. As you can see, as we transition into the acceleration, we're starting to get more of a vertical back angle. We're starting to pick up our eye gaze, but we're still striking in front of the hips. And as we move in to the stop speed, we can actually see we're looking pretty straightforward. The shoulders are over the hips, and we are striking the ground pretty much everything that is in line. So we're talking about sprint speed and how to increase how fast we run. It can be improved one of two ways, either by increasing your stride length or your stride frequency. The stride length is simply how long each step is, and the frequency is how many steps that you're taking. I pulled these graphs from the NSCA, and they show the difference between elite sprinters and novice sprinters, and it compares their stride length and their speed rate. So as you can see in the top graph, elite sprinters, they are taking longer steps than the novice counterparts. And you can see the same thing with their speed rate, the amount of steps that they're taking per second. So we want to increase that. And what the NSC says, there's two ways to get faster at sprinting. The first one is going to be increasing your technique. And then they point out that the second, and the best way, is improving your rate of force development, your RFD. So rate of force development is simply generating the most amount of force as you can in a very short time period. And that time pyramid for a sprinter is going to be when their feet strike the ground until they take off again. So what's going to happen is if they increase the rate of force, they're going to be propelling themselves further. And that means they're going to be spending more time in the air than if they had a minimum amount of rate of force. So as you increase your rate of force, you're going to be increasing your sprint length. And then also, you're going to be increasing your sprint frequency. The picture here is one of the clients that I trained. And you can see in this picture, he is actually completely in the air. His feet is above the ground. And comparing this picture to the previous phases of the sprint, he's still in the acceleration phase probably, kind of getting close to the top speed. As stated previously, the NSCA recommends two ways to increase sprint speed. The first by improving technique, and the second by increasing the rate of force development. They mention that increasing rate of force development is the best way to increase sprint speed, so that is what I'm going to focus on. In order to develop rate of force development, I am trying to increase the strength of my athlete. So with this, when I was designing this plan, I wanted to make sure that I separate training and practice. So I'm going to use resistance training to increase his strength, while on the outside, he's going to be practicing his sprint technique. I do not want to mix them both. You'll see a lot of people and they will combine training and practice. A common way you kind of see this is running with a parachute on. The thought is because it's harder to run like that, they're going to use more strength, so they're going to be able to run faster with the parachute off. But I believe that's going to be training them to sprint improperly because they're going to be practicing running with an increased resistance, which will change the biomechanics, and therefore when they're doing it without the parachute, they're not going to run as fast. So I wanted to split them up completely and really focus on training. I'm also going to be planning my program along block periodization. Now, what block periodization is where you focus on a specific adaptation for a certain amount of time for a block. In this case, my block are going to be 4 weeks long. And the periodization simply means it's a plan. I am going to be planning very specific exercises at a specific sets, repetitions, and rest periods to make sure that I am getting the most out of that block for the adaptation I'm trying to acquire. My first block is going to be a strength block. It's going to be 4 weeks long, and I'm going to be focusing on raw strength. My second block, my second 4 weeks, is going to be power with a little bit of conditioning in there. So now we're going to talk about exercise selection for the strength block. The strength block was 4 weeks long, and it had an A week and a B week. I had my client 1 hour per session. Now, day one was lower body focus. As you can see, the first exercise we did was the squat. We did 3 sets and 3 repetitions. So with the squat being at such low volume, that meant we worked at a very high intensity, meaning a lot of weight. Because of the high intensity, that translated into a very long rest time. We were resting anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes once we got up to our working set. From there, we moved into RDL, Romanian deadlift. This was the secondary focus of the day. And we got more volume on this. So you can see a 4x4. And with that, with the lower intensity, the increased volume, it also translated into a little bit shorter of a rest time. We took about a 1 to 2 minute rest in between each set. The next exercise is suitcase carry. Suitcase carry is essentially a farmer's carry on one side, a unilateral farmer's carry, and is very good for core stabilization. We finished that day off with a sled push, and the sled push actually became a tank push when I will cover the tank more in a later slide. Day 2 was our upper body focus day, with the first exercise being bench at 3x3. Same thing as with the squat. This was at a very high intensity, and we had a very long rest time. From there, we went over to bent over row. As you can see, this is not the primary focus, this is a secondary focus, it's something you get some volume in. From there, we went into push press. I chose push press because I wanted accessory for a shoulder exercise, and I wanted to start using leg drive to help get the shoulder press in. Then we finished with the glute ham raise and the Bulgarian split squats. So I used the glute ham raise because all the studies show that increasing hamstring strength reduces the risk of injury. One of the exercises that is often cited and used for these studies is they use the Nordic curl. I believe the glute ham raise is the next level for the Nordic curl, and it is a staple in this program. And then I really like Bulgarian split squats to work on leg strength unilaterally. So these are the exercises for the B week. As you can see, just by a quick look, the focus slightly shifted. So for example, on our lower body day, instead of having the squat, which is more of a quad dominant, we had the deadlift, which is more of a hamstring dominant exercise. And then as you can see, the deadlift, we did 3 sets of 3. Same thing, we worked at a very high intensity, and we had a very long rest. That was followed by a front squat. So we went from using more of posterior chain, more of the anterior chain. The third exercise was the waiter's walk. Then we moved into the tire flip, and it was a great way to start working a little bit of the explosive drive. The second day of that week, It was the overhead press was the first lift, and as you can see, this is the first time that we're starting to lift at 3 sets of 5. And the reason why we did this is this was kind of a weak spot of my client, so I increased the amount of volume so he got more practice at it. From there, we went to tempo bench. On the tempo bench, we did 4 seconds down. Once he touched his chest, he came up, and it was 4 seconds up. So 4-0-4. This is a tempo bench is a great way to increase the amount of time under tension while keeping the amount of stress on your body relatively low. From there, we went, of course, back to the glute ham raise, and then followed by the split squats again, and then we finish with a suitcase carry. So for the weight selection with this strength block, the main lifts, I was lucky and I had an estimated 1 RM for my client already. I started right around 70 to 75% on his main lifts. And then each time he did the lift, I increased the weights 5 to 10 pounds. For example, his week 1, which was an A week, he did a squat at 70%. The next time he did squat, because he completed all his reps and they looked pretty fast, I increased the weight that he squatted by 10 pounds. So he went from 70% to 80%. And I did this linear progression for all his exercises. So every week, every day, he was lifting more weight than previously. So after our 4 weeks of our strength block, we transitioned into 4 weeks of our power and conditioning block. So for this, we had no A week or B week. This is what we did each week. Our first session was power cleans, then glute ham raises, reverse hypers, jumping, split squats, and then the tank push. So the reason why we did power is typically thought of in the strength and conditioning world as moving weights fast. And I wanted to focus on that. I thought it would have been very good to incorporate the speed to improve the rate of force development. So just like previously, we used linear progression. So the power cleans, we went up by 10 pounds each week. The glute ham raises, we can see that we increased the volume, but I also increased the amount of weight that he did. So when he first started his strength phase, he was doing 4 sets of 4, and those were relatively hard for him. And then by our mid power phase, he was doing 3 sets of 10 with the additional 25 pounds. We also increased the weight each week for his jumping split squats, and that's the main focus of the split squats was not only to jump high, but to focus on the deceleration. So the tank push, the M2 tank, is a very interesting piece of gear. What's interesting about it is that it operates off of magnetic resistance. So the harder you push it, the more resistance it gives you. The client, the athlete, he had it maxed out with 260 pounds on third gear. And then their website says that if you push it 100 feet in 16 seconds, 3.4 miles an hour, the tank gives you somewhere between 4,780 pounds of resistance back, the equivalent of pushing a hippo and or a monster truck. So that's pretty interesting. The second day this week, we had a little bit of a power exercise, the push press. Really wanted to drive the weight up with the lower body and then finish it off with the shoulders. As you can see, I really increased the intensity with this, and you can tell that by the low amount of repetitions. He's only doing 4, or he's only doing 2. We paired that with kettlebell swings, and then we finished this with more of a conditioning 1-for-1 hit run. So essentially, he did 1 minute on, 1 minute off for 20 minutes, and each week we increased his run speed by half a mile an hour. So with this program overall, what I was able to get out of my client is I did a pre-test, and he was running right at a 5-second 40. And then after the 4 weeks of our sprays, he got down to 4.8. And then after our 4 week power phase, he maintained in his 4.8. Our references, where I pulled most of this information from, is from the NSEA and their Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning book. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Thank you and have a good day.